Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Bubble Banter. We are in New Zealand, in Auckland, the three of us tonight. My name is Josh. We have Zach joining us from somewhere in East Auckland. Hello, Zach.
How's it going, Josh? Kia ora.
Kia ora, mate. Good, I'm well. And Reese, who's only a couple of streets away in his own bubble. How are you, Reese?
Very well. If I shout, Josh might hear me.
That's right, yes. So yes, thank you for joining us tonight. Some of the usual faces that we have on Bubble Banter. Tonight, we are looking at two topics. I'm calling it two topics. The way and resurrection. Excuse my spelling there. Two things that we know from the Bible, but two things that I think need a bit of discussion, need a bit of explanation as to what exactly these things are. And we won't necessarily have all the answers. Well, let's find out if we do or not. Before we get started, though, I am just going to open with prayer. So if you'd like to bow your heads. Great Father in heaven, we come before you now, thankful for another opportunity to open your word, to reflect on how amazing you are as a father, as someone that can protect us and guide us. We are so thankful for having a hope in times like these, that we know your son will return. We pray that he will return soon and that your kingdom will be established on this earth. So help us to understand more about you, Father, and your son, and show us good ways to live and help us to be better people and better disciples. So we thank you for all that we have, Father, and we ask it through your son's name, the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Excellent. So the way and resurrection, a nice little separation of these two topics. We are in session 6 of 8, so that's how far we have come. The plan is those two will be next week, Tuesday and Thursday. So we are coming to the pointy end of the series. We are, as I say, going to look at this in two different sections. So let's get started first with the way. Could you find a more cliche picture to begin with? I probably should have asked what would have been a good opening image, but there you go. And I think I do like it, despite the clichéness, because the way, what does that even mean? That's just a bit about nothing, isn't it? What is this, the way? Something that kind of came to my mind when I was looking at that and kind of trying to remove any knowledge I have of what the way is you kind of have people saying, oh, you know, that person's got a interesting way about them, or hey, that's kind of could you go that way? Or so there is lots of ways. So the sign's kind of right. But what the Bible talks about is the way, which let's find out what that actually means. So I've got a few sort of verses to bring up first to kind of introduce what we're talking about with the way. And then we're going to ask some questions of our gentlemen. So the way, what does it say in the Bible about it? What does God say? In John, the book of John, the Gospel of John, Jesus is talking and he says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. So Jesus says, I am the way. Okay, there's a little bit of information for us to kind of hold on to there if we're writing notes. Jesus says, I am the way. He's also the truth and the life. Okay, great. Let's keep going. In the book of Acts, we have in chapter 9, and it says, and asked him for letters to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any belonging to the way, men or women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. What that's talking about is talking about people that were belonging to the way. They were actually identifying as a group that believed, or some sort of, a belonging, some sort of established group of people, right? Men or women that might belong to the way. So that's another reference, and there is a number of them. One I want to draw out before we ask these guys a couple of questions about the way is a little scene that we have here. We have this guy, his name is Felix. This is an occurrence after Jesus has died, and this guy Felix gets this guy Ananias come up to him Ananias is a high priest at this time, and Ananias doesn't like Paul talking about God in certain ways. He's not happy with how God is being represented in terms of Paul's teachings. So Ananias goes to Felix, says, we've got to talk to this guy. He's not saying the right thing. All these other people were sitting around listening because that's what they did back then, it seems. But here is Paul, and he explains to Felix and to Ananias, he says, however, I admit that I worship the God of our ancestors as a follower of the way, which they call a sect. I reckon when he says they, he's pointing at Ananias, because Ananias is the person that's trying to call him out for being part of a sect. I believe everything that is in accordance with the law and that is written in the prophets, and I have the same hope in God as these men themselves have, that there will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. So I strive always to keep my conscience clear before God and man. So we have Paul saying, I'm a follower of the way. And that's what differentiates me from these guys that just believe in God, perhaps. So I guess the question, the first one I have for these guys tonight, and it's not an easy one, I definitely recognize, because it's, it's, as you have seen from these 3 verses, there's a few different ways to take it. What is the way? Zach, have you got a bit of a clearer description you could give us?
I think that I like that it's a difficult question, and I think it is a little bit of an unknown. What I think of is I think of direction. When you say the way, it's direction. So if you don't know the way, you're directionless. And I guess Israel may have been at a stage where they didn't really know where things were going. They were sort of stuck somewhere. And Paul is saying, Jesus is the way. We've got to make sure that we follow Jesus. So I would say, basically, Jesus said, I am the way. And so if we follow Jesus's direction, what he was doing, then I guess that's the way.
Yeah, I like that. Yep, I think that's and I think that's what Paul was. He used a few things to differentiate himself. One was Jesus, and one was the way, and you'd kind of imagine those two.
Yeah, and I like to have my answers as scattered as possible, so you can't really type up what I'm saying. Is what I'm going for there.
Yeah, great. Reese, can you give us anything further about what the way is?
Well, the way is, you're looking for a direction as well, aren't you? Like a result to get to. So to me, Jesus is the process to get back to God. And however he lived or whatever he said, whatever he did, it's teaching us a method or a process of how we can get ourselves back to God out of, if we want to say, a sinful state. Then we can get back to this spiritual state with God. And the only way to do that is by following Jesus in his way. And exactly as Zach says, it's directionless. Everybody can choose a different way of what they believe in Jesus, and there's different miracles and there's different teachings, and apply it in a different method, as long as that gets us to God. So following Jesus is following that process to me.
Nice, that's brilliant. I like that, because I think that's what Paul was trying to explain, is that these people didn't have that way. They didn't have access to God like they thought they did, because they needed Jesus. Yeah, brilliant. I like it. Very good. I've only given you one line there in terms of notes, but I feel like it's no, I was
nail on the head.
That was wonderful. A few comments from in the notes here. Graham says, look up Matthew 7 verse 14 maybe. Straight is the gate and narrow is the way. Yes, I like it, and we're going to look at that a little bit later. So that's fantastic. Right, moving on to the next question I have, which needs a bit of an introduction, because Reese sort of touched on it just then. There is perhaps more than just one way, or is there? There's a lot of people that perhaps profess to say, come to my church, I have the way, I will show you the way. This guy is a pastor. He is a pastor of, I think, what's the big singing group?
He's Justin Bieber's pastor, I'm pretty sure.
I think you might be right. He's Justin Bieber's pastor. I mean, why would we argue with what the Bieber chooses.
Bieber.
Anyone know who
I'm a
this woman
believer.
is? Reese or Zach know who that is?
Is that
Pass.
just
Helen
Cinderella
Grace?
Moon in the future?
Joyce Meyer, correct. I don't know much about her other than I think her plastic surgeon is probably quite wealthy. This guy I don't know, just another pastor, but another person that probably professes, he says, I have the way, this is the way you need to do it. These guys and many before them probably say they have the way. And as New Zealand's most well-known guy in terms of a Christian faith, I'm sure Brian also thinks, I have the way. And I'm not beating on any of these people. Perhaps they do, as Reese just said. Maybe there is a few different ways. So let's have a little think about that, because this verse here is what's just been mentioned in the comments. Because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it. So the question is, who has the way? How narrow is narrow? And again, this is a curly one, and I definitely admit that. Reese, do you want to attempt to answer this one?
I think a lot of people can start on the way, right? They can start on that process, but it's not just a day or a week and then it's over. It's like a lifelong sort of refinement. And I like to think of it like a funnel. It starts out wide and then it gets narrower, narrower, narrower. So the more that you start to apply Jesus' methods of life, like he says, don't act and murder. Instead, it's the thinking, that's the bad bit. So you start applying, okay, no, I can't murder. Now I've got to stop thinking about hatred, or now I've got to start loving my enemies. All these steps, as you get further and further through your life, it becomes harder for us to naturally try and apply that. And yet that's still part of Jesus' process to be on the way. And you can never perfect it throughout the life, but you're within that funnel of just refining your life as you get older and older.
Sorry, unmute myself. Yeah, nice. Yep. It is a journey, and it's one that will take people their entire life of working at it. Zach, anything to add to who has the way? How narrow is it? What, anything more?
I would say to who has the way, 1 Corinthians 1 verse 13, Paul asks the question, is Christ divided? So I feel like Christ is the way, and all of those pastors that we saw before are just trying to teach people about Jesus Christ, and they just have a different approach to it. So, I mean, Jesus is the only way, but those other people are proxies that will try and teach their version of what they think Christ is. Obviously, we're right. No, yeah, that's the thing. We really don't know who has the truth or the true way, but Jesus himself and whatever the Bible tells us, right? For the other question, how narrow is narrow? I mean, I feel like I'm not making the cut right now. It's I feel like Jesus has set such a ridiculously high standard, and I mean, we don't have to be exactly like Christ, but the expectation's really high, but also our God is really gracious and merciful. So I wish I could tell you what the benchmark was, because then I'd just do it and then cruise for the rest of my life. But yeah, you can always improve.
And I think that's kind of the message of the Bible, and it frustrates people, I think, because we just love rules. We do love like a benchmark. But the Bible is, particularly when Christ came, it was a lot of principles, and it was a lot of
Gray
ideas.
areas.
Yeah, great areas, but not in the way that is negative. We kind of need to celebrate that in the sense of how we can identify to that and how we can actually work that out in our lives. Because God wants us to kind of interpret, I think, some things in certain ways. And so how narrow is narrow? I think God is looking at our conscience. Does that sort of resonate with you?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair to say. You're only being measured against yourself, really. Like, what is your potential? How many talents were you given? You got to bring out that many.
Yeah. Nice. Very good. Reese, anything to add before we move on? Happy with that conscience
Yeah,
idea?
I mean, Zach's absolutely right. And when we start having those rules and we compare ourselves against each other with rules, then we don't actually learn that grace and that humility. So I think without the rule, once you start thinking about each other, then it teaches you more about God and Jesus as well, because you can learn to apply grace and humility with each other. So taking that rule away actually teaches you more how to be like God as well.
Yeah, excellent. Very good. Thank you for those answers. We are going to leave the way at that point. That sounds strange, but we are. And we're going to look at the second part of this topic tonight. Before we do, though, Graham has another great verse, Isaiah 30, verse 21. If you want to look in the notes in the comments section, that reads, "And thine ears shall hear a word behind thee, saying, This is the way, walk ye in it." And there is a lot of references to in the Bible, including in the Old Testament and in the New, about the way. So a great little study. We've only just touched on some of it, and hopefully kind of inspires you to look a little bit more at it.
Can I segue from the way to resurrection for you?
Oh, please.
Because you had that cool verse up before, Acts 24 verses, is it like
16, 14?
14 and 15? Because Paul actually he's talking about the way in verse 14, and then he follows through with verse 15, and he says that there will be a resurrection of both the righteous and the wicked. So I feel like the two topics must be linked that way.
Connected.
And that two verses, connect them quite nicely.
Absolutely, and I think that's part of the way with Jesus is knowing about this resurrection, which Paul's obviously bringing out. And the idea of resurrection has been amongst, I guess, Christian believers and churches for a number of years. Here's a photo from just last year, and this was in South Africa, where a pastor said he had resurrected a man. Unfortunately, he hadn't. About 2 or 3 months later, he actually confessed that the family had put him up to it, the family of this man, and that, yes, this man was in fact, had not died. But yes, there's claims of things like this.
We could have been pretty confident that he had the way if that was the case, if he really did resurrect him, right?
Yeah. But if you want to look up that story, go for it. But yeah, he was getting a few legal challenges around corruption and all sorts as a result. So there you go. Just an interesting segue. Now, there's a few different ways we talk about resurrection, I guess. When sometimes we might say, oh, resurrection, we're talking about past cases, right? So what I want to address is a few cases in the Bible, because a lot of people probably just think it's Jesus got resurrected, that's it. But there's actually a number of people in the Bible that were raised from the dead. The widow of Zarephath's son, right? So this is a story back in the Old Testament. So there were resurrections before Jesus as well. And that was a young boy that was resurrected by Elijah. We have the Shunammite woman's son, who was resurrected by a man of God, Elisha, who was kind of Elijah's protege. So in that same sort of area of time. Jesus resurrected a man named Lazarus, and the interesting thing about Lazarus was he had already been put in a tomb, and as you can see from that photo there, he had already been sort of probably wrapped up, and so yeah, he was very much dead, and Jesus raised Lazarus. Obviously, there is the obvious one that many people know of, with Jesus being raised. Another good sort of Sunday school story style one is a man named Eutychus, who was listening to some words of Paul, who we've talked a bit about tonight, and he fell asleep in the window and fell out the window and is said to have died, and Paul raised him back from the dead. That's a nice photo. I did find this one though, and I wanted to show everyone this one because I thought that one was hilarious.
I've been asleep.
Diving off the windowsill.
Yeah, if I was drawing someone falling out a window at night, it just wouldn't look like that. But there you go. There's Eutychus falling out the window. So all of these people raised, and there's others as well. I've just sort of handpicked some of the more well-known ones, I guess. But looking at the resurrection, what are we actually referring to when we say, oh, the resurrection? We're not usually talking about those cases necessarily. We're talking about something else to do with us. Reese, we'll start with you. What are we talking about when we're talking about, what are we referring to?
Well, it's a time in the future when Jesus returns to earth, and there's a particular resurrection where he raises all the people who have had an opportunity to believe in him. So that resurrection is bringing you back bodily and mentally in the state that you were before you died, right? So it's whatever emotional or spiritual or mental state that you're in, that's how Jesus brings you back at that time that he raises everybody else with you.
Excellent, nice, succinct answer. Yep. Yeah, very good. Zach, anything? I saw you scribbling down maybe something,
yes.
or looking at the Bible.
Yeah. Daniel chapter 12 verse 2 says, multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life and others to shame. So I think that's an Old Testament reference. And when Jesus was resurrected eternally, we could see like, oh wow, this is he's the first fruits of the rest of these people that are going to be raised to eternal life. So
yep, yes it does. Yep, the first fruits verse, very good. No, that's good, perfect. That's kind of what I was after, I guess. Yeah, sometimes people there's maybe a little bit of gray area sometimes with resurrection versus maybe going to heaven, and I'm not actually sure. I don't know if you guys know if you just as a bit of a disclaimer, I guess, I don't believe in going to heaven when we die, and I'm pretty sure Zach and Reese don't either.
I'm not, you know.
Confirmed?
Not yet, maybe after tonight.
Yeah, you can convince me.
Yeah, well, hey, it's fine. Yeah. No, but I'm not sure how they work the resurrection into also going to heaven. This is a genuine question from me because I don't actually know the answer. What process if I die now and Jesus returns, as the Bible talks about a lot, and I think you still believe in Christ's return? How does that work? Does anyone know?
Is there?
Yeah.
Do you go to heaven and then you come back with Jesus when he comes back to the earth to judge? Is that?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I think so.
There is a verse in Thessalonians, I think it's depending on which translation you might have, can be taken the wrong way, if you want to put it. So it's like Jesus returns, raises people, and then there's a phrase, gathered in the clouds. So some people look at that and go, yep, there's resurrection, there's Jesus on earth, and then he's taken us into the clouds, into heaven. And that's
right.
Just what that verse is saying on face value.
Okay, nice. Laura's got a good point. Sorry, go Zach. I'll get to Laura.
No. Do Laura's one first.
Laura's one's pretty good. I think it beats you both actually. She's going to be a future panelist. I know it. The soul goes to heaven. Because we know God gives us our breath, right? God gives us life. And there's a verse in Ecclesiastes, I believe, that says your body returns to dust and the spirit returns to God above. And that's talking about the fact that God takes back the spirit that he gave you, and your body is, and what Laura's saying is that your body is resurrected later. So people would say, my soul goes to heaven, and then I kind of go back into my body and come back up. Maybe that's what they'd say. Anyway, Zach, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I mean, I feel like if we say that we go to heaven, we're sort of taking away from Jesus a bit, because it's Jesus is the dude that got to go to heaven. And John chapter 3 verse 13 says, no one has ever gone into heaven except the one who came from heaven, the Son of Man. So,
right. Yeah, very good.
So that's why I don't think I go to heaven when I die. I'm waiting for this resurrection that the Bible keeps talking about.
Very good. So am I. Yeah, and I think there's this is not tonight's topic, and we have got a little bit loosely, entirely my fault. off topic. We aren't actually addressing the heaven going versus staying dead thing, but yeah, interesting discussion all the same. All right, let's get it back on track with the next question then. And the next question is, actually, first, there's actually, I'll tell you what the question is first, because this will make a bit more sense. What are some facts that we have about the resurrection? This is where I want a bit more of open discussion. It's actually our last question, so it's going to be potentially a short night. But what are some facts we have about resurrection? I'll give you one that we maybe have from the Bible. Jesus says to some guys come at Jesus and they say, they gave this crazy hypothetical situation where a woman is married and then her husband dies, and then she has to remarry, because that's what you do back then. For your own welfare, you need to be married to kind of survive as a woman. That was those times. She would marry the brother of the man of her now passed away husband. Let's say that happens 7 times. There's 7 different brothers that all die, and she's been married to them all. That's all happened. Then she dies. Now they're all raised together. Who is she married to? What a conundrum, Jesus. What happens with this? And Jesus' answer is, at the resurrection, people will neither marry nor be given in marriage. They will be like the angels in heaven. So we get these little snippets of information around the resurrection. I thought it would be interesting to kind of to make this the last question around, what do we know about the resurrection? What are some facts? What are some different things? By the way, with this quote, I'm not, I think a lot of people would take this to mean, oh, there's going to be no weddings in the kingdom. It's going to be no marriages. If you're resurrected, then you won't be married to your ex-partner. I'm not sure Jesus actually meant that. I think Jesus probably was talking about the fact that women won't be given in marriage, as they were explaining the situation of this woman having to be given in marriage each time, and more that scenario of kind of human possession rather than the fact of marriage. Anyway, that's a side point which we can discuss.
Is Sophie watching or something, Josh? Is that what you?
Sophie, Sophie's in the other room. Okay, so other than that potential fact, do you guys have any sort of anything that comes to mind about what will the resurrection be like? What else is involved? Yeah, let's start with Zach.
When I think resurrection, I think hope. Now, like, resurrection to me is like, even though, because death sucks. Like, let's face the facts here, people. Death is a horrible thing, and resurrection to me spells hope, because all of those who have been asleep, and the Bible uses the word asleep for dead people, because in the resurrection they wake up again. So to me, that brings a lot of hope, because death is probably one of the hardest things to deal with in this life.
So it's basically the embodiment of hope is resurrection. That's like that's the fact of it, really.
Yeah. I mean, that's.
I like that. Reese, what do you reckon? Do you have any sort of fact to open this little discussion up?
To me, resurrection isn't the be all and end all. So although it's an incredible miracle, it's that Jesus is bringing a lot of people back to life, so that they would be judged before him. Like, what have you done with your life now? Have you been a good servant for him? Have you just decided to do whatever you want? So the resurrection is like, now's this chance to stand before Jesus and just have a talk about what you've done with your life. Have you used it properly? Have you served him? Have you given him all the glory and honor that he deserves? And then if he thinks that you have, that's when you get this immortality that Jesus has. So resurrection's kind of the first step, and then you get the immortality if he sees that you've been a good servant for him.
Nice, very good. I'm going to write that down quickly, but I need you to explain, because we may not all be on the same page. What do you mean by this? I don't know if you said the word judgment, but explain to me if you can. So I've been resurrected. What happens from that point? If you've got anything
From that
into
point,
me there.
it's as if Jesus is on earth when this happens, right? So you're quite literally brought before Jesus himself to talk about what you've done with your life. So because you've got this knowledge of who he is and what he expects of you in your life, and it's up to you today to choose how you want to serve him. At that judgment, he's going to go, well, did you sort of look after the poor people? Did you feed those who need it? Did you take care of the people as I asked you to in my word in the Bible? And then you've got to honestly reply to him, well, yes or no, I just served myself. And then there's this judgment that he chooses, okay, did you honor me? Then great, I'm going to give you immortality. Did you dishonor me? As in basically, disobey my commands or make my name sort of like mud, and then sorry, you're going to have to die again.
Very good. Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit of a, it's for some people quite, and I think we'd probably be all lying if we said there's not a little bit of fear involved in that moment. But there is also, I think, a lot of things to be excited by in a strange way by that moment, being face to face with Jesus. Zach, anything to kind of add to that moment, or any other facts you want to share?
Well, I mean, we could ask the question, who is going to be resurrected?
Oh no, really?
We could say, like, I mean, is it everybody that's ever lived on the world that is going to be resurrected? So I was reading the Bible the other day, and in John 15 verse 22, Jesus said, "If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not be guilty of sin. Now, however, they have no excuse for their sin." So pretty much Jesus is the way, and if we know about Jesus being the way and we choose not to embrace it, I guess we are then put up for judgment, aren't we? We'll probably be part of the resurrection, but like in that Daniel verse said before, some of those people in the resurrection are just going to die again, right? But then, so there's the people that are resurrected are the people that know about Christ and his way. So I think those people will be resurrected, but some people are going to be resurrected and be like, oh man, I've messed up. I was not expecting this. So
yeah,
then there's going to be this judgment that you guys are talking about.
Yeah, and maybe there's,
sorry.
Yeah, that's right. No, I think you're right. I think there's this, I think part of that judgment is the expectation. We asked to wait. And I think that's going to be a big thing, and Jesus will know those people that are waiting for him. I think that's a pretty big part of it. As it says, you can't, you kind of fall asleep in the wait. Yeah. Okay.
There's First Thessalonians chapter 4. So another cool thing about the resurrection, he says something about, in verse 15, "For this we say to you by the word of the Lord, that we who are alive and remain until the coming of the Lord will not precede those who have fallen asleep." So the resurrection is going to have the people that are living at the time, let's say it's 3000 AD, who knows. So the people that are alive are going to be hanging out with Jesus, and then there's going to be this resurrection as well. So it's not all just going to be chaos Armageddon and then blah, zombies come up. No, it's going to be a whole bunch of living people that are getting judged.
Yep, no, I like that. That's and for those that, this is new information, that's I think pretty well backed up in verses like that First Thessalonians chapter 4:1. So yeah, I like it. I have a good sort of question which we may or may not be able to answer. Our bodies. So let's say we all get, I don't know, we all knock off today, and 3000 AD, as Zach mentioned, is a potential date. Our bodies are going to look pretty worse for wear. What do we look like? I don't know if I'm in my prime right now. I feel like maybe when I was sort of in 22, it was probably more my prime. What age do we come back? How does this work? Any thoughts, guys, on your body?
I think, I'm hoping that I get the height of Reese. Just looking on the camera, he's a magnificent.
Getting close to it. Getting close.
So I'm gonna, Yeah, I'm going to be asking for that at judgment.
Yeah, nice.
Mm.
So you'll be the same height, hopefully, if not taller. Yeah. Any ideas on your body, Reese? Will we recognise you as that beautiful mug with those curly locks?
Oh,
Oh wow, is that going to change as well? That's a scary thing.
Mm,
There's a verse which really encourages me, and I don't know why, because I don't actually know exactly what Jesus is like, but it says that we will be made like him.
mm,
So whatever Jesus is like now, if he's some sort of angelic being, or if he's just got this ethereal sort of glowing frame to him, I have no idea. But the only thing that the verse says, I think it's First John, somewhere in First John 3, I believe, that we're going to be made just like he is. So he's
yep.
immortal, he's with God, he's never going to die. And however our body is changed to be like him, well, that's an amazing hope, isn't it?
Yep. Nice.
and 1 Corinthians 15, they're asking the same question near the end of the chapter, and they give this analogy of if you plant something, it goes in as this little tiny seed, and then when it comes up, it's this like epic plant. So I feel like we die as this form, and we're essentially just the seed right now. And what we
Mm,
will be after the resurrection, and this change that happens in the twinkling of an eye, is just something so much more.
yep.
Yes.
I agree. Yep. I like that. My thing I've been thinking about recently with it. Oh, do you mind if I just answer my own question? Great.
Yeah,
Um,
go. What do you think, Josh?
oh, thanks, Zach. Thanks for having me on. No, I like going back to that verse that I mentioned. I should actually dig it. Is it Ecclesiastes 12? I think that our
I don't think,
bodies.
is there an Ecclesiastes in the Bible?
Oh heck, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Ecclesiastes. That our bodies return to dust, and the spirit, returns to God. It's not even our spirit; it's God's spirit that returns to Him. What I sort of think returns to God is sort of the memory of us. Yeah. So God is, we've been communicating with God while we've been alive. We've been praying. He's been helping us. We've been trying to do our best for God. Then we pass away, and that the spirit that God gave us returns to Him. That memory is sort of with God. And then when it comes to the resurrection, what is left is sort of that memory. And I think when we come to see Reese, we will kind of recognize Reese for those qualities that God has as well. So we'll recognize Reese for the way he speaks and the way that he can kind of eloquently tell us things about what he understands from the Bible, the way that he's been helpful in his life, all of these things. And maybe you kind of double take when you see someone because you recognize all those things that God also did, all those good things. And I think that's also a cool thing about resurrection is God might sort of look at it and go, here's the memory I've got. But then if I put this memory of this person back on earth in a resurrected form, there's nothing left of them because there's nothing for me to remember of them good that they did. So if that's, I think, maybe the differentiation of how, those that will kind of remain after the resurrection is those that can, because there's a memory of the good things they've done.
So we get all of the good aspects of Reese, like his gentle kindred spirit, but then
Yes.
maybe he eats food slightly differently in the kingdom.
I
Is
hope
that
so.
like, yeah?
Because I was doing that wrong. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm going for. Yeah, Reese. Sorry.
That attitude will be gone, hopefully.
Really awkward
Yeah,
for this.
yeah.
So if I just hide myself for a while, and then Zach, it's all good about Zach. It's like,
Do you like that idea? Is that sort of, do you feel like, I mean, this is, by the way, we're kind of getting supposition from what we know
Philosophical.
yeah, philosophical, but I think there is some good principles around resurrection that kind of lend themselves to this sort of, yeah.
I
Yeah,
think
happy
you're
with
onto
that?
something there, Josh, because it's like, that verse where God looks on the inward, the heart of man. So he doesn't
Mm,
see the appearance or the shape or the curly hair or whatever, the height that you guys are rabbiting on about for the last 40 odd minutes. So he's going to look on Zach's heart and go, okay, that guy's an absolute, he's a legend. He's got a lot of humility, a lot of diligence. He's bashful, you know. So that's what God's going to see, and I agree with you. I reckon that's what God's going to pull out in the kingdom. That's the type of person that he wants to be there.
Yeah. Thanks for agreeing. I like that. This has gone really well. Nice. Oh. All right, let's start to wrap it up. If anyone has any other questions or any other curveball things around resurrection, we're going to finish in the next minute or two, but feel free to throw them in the comments and we can give them a quick attempt at an answer. Because there is a lot of sort of almost hypothetically sort of things that go around your head as to how this sort of works. What if I'm cremated? I don't know, all that sort of stuff. Last few images, what do you picture as resurrection being like more? And you both have to say left or right. Are you ready?
Oh, shucks. Left looks epic. I like, although, I mean, some people would see that as grim, but I like the cool colors of that. And I feel like maybe it is that, like, whereas the other one's just so airy fairy. Like, I don't think he's going to send 3.
The left is like a zombie apocalypse.
No, it's just a graveyard, and there's just so happens to be bats flying in because it's nighttime. Who knows when Jesus returns? It could be night, could be day.
In Transylvania, Dracula's there in the background somewhere.
Telling you reading into things about it. It's a beautiful full moon when Jesus returns as well.
Passover, you reckon?
Yeah, very likely.
Yeah, and this just kind of demonstrates the different perspectives people have on resurrection, and and what it might be like, kind of that pretty grim, gritty, kind of scary moment of people limping around, like, versus quite an ethereal sort of moment. And look, and let's be honest, there is a lot of elements of it that's really hard for us to imagine. We know what we know from the word that God's given us, but beyond that, it can get into imagery like this. The one that I sort of like a bit more, because it's just plainer and it's just sort of showing someone in their hoodie. No, but it's just that sort of I don't know, more peaceful sort of, I don't know why I like that image. Is something that's maybe a little bit more on point of what I sort of expect, but hey, that's not necessarily right either. I'm just sort of throwing out some images.
Is that a few minutes after the scene that you were showing on the left before?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm imagining with this one as a spaceship above him with a laser beam pulling him up.
Yeah, maybe that's Roswell. But no, to kind of summarize, resurrection is one of those things that we are excited by, but there's probably some unknowns in terms of exactly what it will be like to face Jesus, to know the exact process afterwards, but we are sure there is one to come, and who knows, maybe none of us will see death. There is an element of people, as we've read in some of those verses, that won't see death when Christ will return before they do. Okay, last comment there. Oh, thank you, Ron. He has found that Ecclesiastes verse. It is chapter 3 and verse 19. Dust to dust. So yeah, look that up if you. I like that one. It's good.
Ecclesiastes 12 verse 7 also says something similar. I think that's what you're going for.
Yeah, I thought it was 12. Okay, good. Not going crazy. That concludes tonight's discussion. We have rushed through both of these things, but this is supposed to try and, awaken a few ideas and comments and thoughts and banter around these topics. Resurrection is one that we could do every night for this whole series and still have questions at the end of it, but hopefully that's given you something to think about, even some verses to kind of explore as to what that is, and the way as well, as something which is really connected with Jesus, something which was introduced really after Jesus sort of died. People started identifying themselves as the way, and it's kind of Christianity's the new word. The way is sort of the old word for it. Okay, next week / next Tuesday, we are continuing bubble banter. Separation, act of a merciful God. So we will see where that takes us. Thank you very much for joining us. Zach, Reese, thank you.
Thank you.
Ka kite anō.
Excellent. Thank you for your answers. I feel like we maybe haven't nailed all of the answers that people might like to hear. So yes, please comment on wherever you're seeing this video. And we can always do a bit more on one of these topics if you feel like it has left a bit to be desired. So yes, but for now, it is goodbye, good night, and see you next Tuesday for part 7 of 8. Thank you very much.